Thanks for joining us for In Studio from Simply Timeless. I'm your host, Jay Daniels. Adrian Cunningham is certainly no stranger to many in the world of jazz. In fact, he's just released two new albums. One is a feature on the songs of Disney, and the other on the music of Lerner and Loewe. Adrian will talk with us about those albums in just a moment, but first we go back to Australia to hear about Adrian's first musical memories with his family. Here's Adrian Cunningham.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Sydney, in the suburbs of Sydney, about half or an hour away from the Opera House, if that means something to some of your listeners. And it's a beautiful place to be. The quality of life is fantastic. There's a lot of great musicians. I had some really wonderful mentors growing up. And I discovered jazz through my dad's 78 collection. He loved jazz. He loved Louis Armstrong, Fats Waller, Mills Brothers. So my brother and I were exposed to that from a young age. He had a really nice 78 collection. So, we'd stack them up on the record player. We loved watching them fall. And, it was a real into another world for me. So, I was certainly exposed to the music from a young age. And then went through the Conservatorium of Sydney. I did a jazz performance degree on clarinet when I was just out of high school, and worked as a musician professionally for many years in Australia. I didn't move to New York till I was 31. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of good experience, a lot of professional work in Australia. It's unfortunately, despite all the amazing things about living in Australia, the opportunities are limited, compared to obviously living in New York. And I moved a year after visiting, I moved to New York. I think the year before I visited as a tourist, and I was there for about 10 days. I was in the city. And I went back to Sydney, and I was so inspired. I was like, my God, this is unbelievable. The level of musicianship and the number of amazing musicians. And I just kind of went back home, and I thought to myself, if I don't give this a go, I'm going to regret it. Yeah. So I didn't really have a plan. I just got a visa, and I thought, all right, I'll come over. And I gave it. In my mind, I had enough money saved to live comfortably in terms of renting and eating for about 6 months. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to freak out and think, what am I doing with my life? Because I gave up a good career in Australia. I was earning good money, doing a lot of commercial work, but I really wanted to play jazz more full time. So I said to myself, all right, give it 6 months and then worry about what you're going to do. So I did. I just kind of hunkered down. I gave it all I could for 6 months in terms of going to jam sessions, meeting musicians. And after 6 months, I saw the potential of me forging something substantial. So I just stayed. And here I am, 12 years later, still here.
And your name has become well recognized within the jazz community. You've done a good bit of work with another friend of ours, Ken Poplowski, great clarinetist and saxophonist in his own right. And just before everything shut down, I got to see him play live in concert at the Birdland Theater. What a fantastic musician he is. And you all did an album a couple of years ago, I believe, a collaborative effort together. And for the record, you are what you would be considered... You would be considered a multi-instrumentalist, so you not only play the saxophone, but also the clarinet and the flute. Is there anything you don't play?
There's lots of things I don't play, Jay. I play piano. I used to work in Sydney. I used to work as a piano player doing the occasional gig, but since moving to New York, there's so many good players. There's no need for me to do anything, but I do love playing. I try and play a little every day on piano. I play bad drums, but I like who doesn't like having a hit on the drums? Who doesn't like having a whack? It's kind of therapeutic, isn't it? So I like playing a little bit of bad drums. And aside from that, that's kind of the limits of what I can do. I can pick up lots of different kind of flutes and make noises out of them, beer bottles and things like that. They're all kind of fun to noodle on. But in terms of professional level playing, I would say, saxophone, clarinet, and flute is where I would draw the line.
And I think it was about 5 years after you moved to New York. You have, again, become well known for your talents. You've played a number of the clubs in town. But you ventured out and put together a unique group of individuals. And you're known as Professor Cunningham and his old school. Now, I want to talk about the old school in just a moment, but for those who may not be dyed-in-the-wool jazz fans, there's a certain story behind that term professor. And I don't know if it's because, of your educational background or if you're leaning toward the historical use of that word professor in the jazz world.
when the band first was formed, let me tell you a little background about the Professor Band. It's obviously swing music is something I grew up with, as we mentioned earlier, and I've always loved it. Love big band. You know, it's something that I've always been passionate, especially being a clarinetist. Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw. You know, those two big heroes of mine growing up. And I moved to New York, and within a few months of moving to New York, I got hired to play this gig, and it was, I don't know if you're aware of this event. It was called Frankie 95. Now, this might not be familiar to jazz fans in particular, but if you're interested in swing dancing or Lindy Hop dancing, this was huge. There was a gentleman called Frankie Manning who was around in the 30s, late 20s, 30s in Harlem at the Savoy Ballroom. He was there when swing music essentially was born in New York, and swing dancing along with that, with like Chick Webb Band. So he knew all those bands, and he was turning 95 in 2008 when I first moved to New York. And they had a huge world event for this guy because he essentially resurrected dancing for a whole new generation of young kids. So that's a little sidetrack. So I moved to New York, and I played this gig with all these thousands of young people all dancing to swing music, and it just blew my mind because we had nothing like this in Australia. So I got kind of enthralled with the world of swing and the concept of dancing to live music, which outside of maybe Latin music I'd never done before. So me, this was amazing. This is unbelievable because, you know, as a kid, I'd go to crappy nightclubs and kind of throw myself around on the dance floor like an idiot, like you do, you know. But I realized there's a whole culture that just disappeared of couples socially dancing, you know. So for me, it was amazing. It was a combination of the dance form, the art form of dance combined with this music I love. So I was just, you know, I really enjoyed it. And there's festivals all around the world. So that's a long sidetrack. So I wanted to create a band that could essentially do that sort of music that's rooted in the tradition. It's not contemporary, because I do love the contemporary stuff as well. So I wanted to define a difference. Back to your question. So I essentially thought, okay, I didn't want to play modern music. I wanted to play old music. You know, old music in inverted commas, it's a loose term. So then I thought, okay, old school. That's kind of cool, old school. Then I thought, what do you associate with school? Teacher, professor. And as you are right, there's like a moniker for a lot of artists like Dr. John, Professor Longhair in New Orleans. And as you said, Dr. Lonnie Smith, you know, this connection with, you know, high esteem, Duke Ellington, you know, Count Basie. So I thought, well, why not just stick that on it as well? So therefore, the title Professor Cunningham and His Old School. Was that long enough for you, that answer?
That was a perfect answer. And I will tell you, I appreciate many forms of jazz music, but there is something to be said for that traditional style, especially that New Orleans style. Whenever I hear people like Louis Armstrong, for many years there were a lot of jazzers who said that he was out of touch, that he was out of style. But, you know, I think there was something to be said about artists like Louis and others who I think they were serious musicians. Let's not discount that here. They were serious musicians, as is your ensemble. But yet I think, especially for Louis, he really wanted to make people happy through his performances. He was not only a great musician and artist, but also an entertainer. And that's, whenever I listen to this style of music, it makes me feel good. And especially on days like today where it's cloudy, it's gray, it's raining outside, and I'm able to listen to your latest project with the Old School. Professor Cunningham and His Old School swings the songs of Disney. Now, I'm going to tell you, Adrian, this album, when I saw that it was coming out, it immediately brought back a flurry of childhood memories. And I want to ask you about your connection with the songs of Disney. Did you grow up with these films in Australia?
We certainly did. I didn't grow up with a family that particularly was Disney fans, although when I was, I guess, a late teenager, the whole resurgence, the Disney Renaissance essentially came around with movies like Lion King. So that, and Aladdin, that whole next generation came through. So there's a lot of the early stuff I was certainly aware of musically, but I hadn't really watched the movies or anything like that. Everyone knows about Mary Poppins and all that kind of business, but it certainly hadn't, I wasn't a diehard Disney fan in the sense of knowing all the movies. Some of the guys in my band, diehard fans,
Yeah.
But the actual concept of this album, funnily enough, it came up because I was last year. I mean, I go back to Australia to visit my family and do concerts and things, and I was sitting with two school friends having some lunch, and we're all in early 40s now, and they both have young girls, and they're always giving me unsolicited career advice, and they're well-meaning, lovely, lovely, lovely. And they said, "Why don't you do a kids album?" And I was thinking, oh God, okay, here we go, because we have a band in Australia called the Wiggles. I don't know if they're particularly known in America, but they are the biggest selling recording artists in Australian history. And they wear turtlenecks and they sing songs to 4-year-olds, but it's the biggest market in the world. So my well-meaning friend said, "Why don't you do a kids album?" And I was thinking, oh, we've got to tour shopping malls playing songs about hot potatoes and pizzas. But then, we talked about it more, and it started to sink in, and somehow the concept of tying that in with Disney came about. And I was thinking, Disney, now there's something I can kind of stick my teeth into, because as you said earlier, the concept of Disney is something that generations can associate with. I mean, this music goes back 60 years, some of the songs that we recorded. There's just so much catalog to choose from, and it really reaches a huge variety of people. So, I really love that concept that, you can certainly reach generations through the same concept of the Disney brand.
And I want to speak to you musically about this for a moment. It does include what you would call classics. In fact, every one of the films featured would be a classic from as far back as, say, A Cinderella, A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes. But I think the newest material would be from 1994. The Lion King, I think, would be the newest that you have on there. Of course, I was listening through and heard a classic. What is it? You've Got a Friend in Me, or it's not Toy Story, but it's the song from Aladdin. And you did it. There are two instances of tributes to Louis Prima also in this album. There's I Want to Be Like You from Jungle Book. And then within that song from Aladdin, there are several hints of Sing, Sing, Sing from Louis Prima. So, we're not only paying tribute to Disney here, but also to some of these jazz musicians, or in the case of Louis Prima, I mean, he was a pop crossover for sure. How did you go about crafting the arrangements for these songs? Because some of these have been done time and time again. So when you and your band got together and said, okay, we are going to do a Disney album, what was it that you were searching for? What was the sound that you wanted to emulate when the band got together to record?
Well, yeah, I guess it's a lot of preparation coming up with an overall concept to put together. I think the band in itself has a personality. Like this lineup that we recorded, we've been together for 5 or 6 years. We've done a lot of touring, so I know how the band sounds. So I think that's a really strong foundation to start with, to know, okay, what's it going to sound like with this band playing it? Because these boys, the band already has a style of its own. So I really wanted to try. There's a lot of angles to come at this with. First of all, I wanted to get a decent cross section of music. I didn't want to just choose one era of Disney. I wanted to try and get a cross section of different generations, as I said earlier. So there's that. That was really important. And the other thing was, I still wanted to keep it within essentially a New Orleans / traditional mainstream. I still wanted to appeal to, let's say, the dance community who really loves this band. So I wanted to keep the music in your shoes. I wanted to make people feel like they want to move to it. So that there's some really important things for me to consider. Other than with each particular arrangement, I don't know. I think everyone was different. Let me have a look. When You Wish Upon a Star, I think for that one, I was kind of inspired by, Dave Brubeck did a Disney album, Dave Brubeck Quartet. And that is an extraordinary album. If your fans haven't heard it out there, it's an amazing album.
Dave Digs Disney.
That's the one. And Paul Desmond, they do a beautiful version of When You Wish Upon a Star. And so I kind of thought, that's such a great swinging arrangement of that. So then I kind of took what they did and I wanted to give it a bassy kind of feel. So I put it in essentially a bassy kind of flavor. The one, what was it? Never Had a Friend Like Me from Aladdin. Yeah, I started to kind of listen to that, and I thought, you know what, this sounds like they've just ripped off Sing Sing Sing. And then because I couldn't sit down and start to write an arrangement of it without thinking this is Sing Sing Sing. So I thought, what am I fighting it for? I'll put them together. You know, I'll pay tribute to essentially, I guess, where the flavor of this song came from originally. So I just kind of stuck them together, and we did a little bit of a mashup of Sing 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 along with that Aladdin song. So yeah, so every I guess every track has a little origin of its own, and I tried to kind of make it essentially just to make it feel good.
And it's a fun album. In fact, you provide vocals for a number of these tracks, and also your trombonist is featured on one. And there is a point where a number of your band members join in. It's a song from Dumbo, When I See an Elephant Fly. Everybody gets to join in on that one at some point.
Yeah. Man, when I heard that song, it's just so great. I mean, the lyrics are amazing. The cheekiness of the song, I thought this song is just written for our band. So I said, all right, boys, we all stood around the microphone, and I gave them their script, and I said, some of the boys swapped the lines. I don't like my line. Can I take your line? So we did it live. We got the guitar and the bass, and we all stood around a couple of microphones and just, we kind of rapped it out. And it's really fun. That was a lot of fun.
My neighbors were probably mad at me this morning because when I done seen about everything when I see it. Yeah, they're probably like, there he goes singing again.
Don't you stop for your neighbors, Jay. You be you.
Let's think about the connection between Disney and what many call the Great American Songbook. It is interesting. I notice, especially in the world of jazz, looking at the recordings that are coming out and looking at when a lot of these impressions of songs started to become popular again. I think about not only Disney, but also songs from Motown, pop hits of the 60s and 70s. For many years, they were not covered in great order by jazz artists. And here lately, there have been a number of releases from jazz artists focusing on the works of Disney, which previously had been fairly limited. And while many haven't exactly thought of these Disney songs as standards necessarily, maybe a couple of them, like a When You Wish Upon a Star especially, I think would be a standard for sure. Or Someday My Prince Will Come from Snow White. But in the eyes of many, these were family songs, these were kids' songs, and yet here we are giving these the standard treatment. And I do think that over time, these have been integrated into what you would call the songbook. I don't know if there is a proper answer for this, but I'll ask the question either way and pick your brain on it. What role do these Disney songs play in the ever-expanding songbook?
Wow, that's a tough one, isn't it? What role do they play? I think any good song, any well-written song is going to have life to be recreated. I think that's a beautiful thing about jazz. I mean, it's since its origins, it's been taking Tim Pan songs, and then greatly written songs, and all the American Songbook and the musical genre. I think jazz has an ability to take a well-written song and recraft it, and I think the better written the song musically, harmonically, and the more depth it has, the more possibilities a musician can have to reinterpret it. So I think it has a place because these songs are so well written. Not all of them, I'll be honest with you. Some of them are a little naff to my palate, but there's so much good material. And Disney, when you think about the entity, the company, the corporation, I mean, they have so much money just in terms of what they can produce. They can hire the best people, they can hire the best songwriters, they can put the best stories together. So it's there really is incredibly well crafted music in the Disney genre. And I think with anything that jazz has done since the dawn of time is to take great music and to recraft it. And I think a good song of any style, in terms of like you're saying, more modern things, more modern R&B, that musicians will always find ways to recreate something that's well put together.
I think so. And the thing that you and the old school have been able to do, there are some arrangements and recordings that I hear of songs where they take them and they're almost unrecognizable. You have to really dig to find out, do I know this song? Is it the same song? But what you've been able to do, according to my ear, and I think you'll agree, you have preserved the heritage, you have preserved the integrity of these songs while putting them in a different light, while giving them a new arrangement, but not so much to where they lose their footing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, well, once again, as I said earlier, I think the band already has an established sound. So I knew that what we would be able to do with this music will be within our capability of making it feel good and presenting, what we do in a new format, with new material.
And you have paid homage not only to songs from Disney, but there was a release that came out just before that. The music of Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Loewe. A lot of wonderful songs. Some of my favorites, in fact, that you recorded on that last album. And these are all what we would call, timeless songs. A friend of mine and I were talking the other day. She's a bassist named Jen Hodge. She was talking about a concert that she was doing virtually the other day. And we were talking about song selections. And she says, I'm trying to focus on songs that musically are challenging for me, something that helps me to grow. She says, but right now, people want things that are comfortable, that are familiar, that remind them of something good. When you think of the Lerner and Loewe songs, when you think of the Disney songs, for me, I think it really does remind people of good memories from the past. These are songs that have had a great deal, of a personal connection to them. In your opinion, especially considering what we're going through now, and I don't want to make that the sole focus of this interview, but considering the current climate that most of us are in, why is it important that we have songs like those from Lerner and Loewe and those from Disney? Why should we provide people with things that are familiar right now?
For me, I think... I don't know. I mean, in terms of my own, let's say, emotional situation of being quarantined in my apartment in New York, I'm trying to, rather than feel nostalgic, I'm trying to keep forward. We're actually recording a new album from our quarantined premises. So I'm actually going the other direction. I'm writing all new material. I've been using this time to really kind of be inspired to write new music. I think there's probably a certain sense of nostalgia when you're going through, in terms of the human condition, going through rough times like this, where you don't know about the future and you're feeling frustrated to look backwards. And I think that's the sense of nostalgia can be useful sometimes as an escape. But yeah, I don't know. I can only speak from where I'm at right now with this condition, and that's just to keep going forward, to try and make the most of this time to create new stuff.
Music has always played an important role in your life. In fact, if I were to understand your story correctly, music is what helped to bring you to this country, to bring you to the city. So let me just ask one last question. Why music?
Oh, wow. Well, I love it. It makes me happy. Nothing makes me happier than playing. It's always been like that for me ever since I was a teenager. So it made sense for me just to follow that above all else. And, there's certainly sacrifices you make as a musician in terms of some life decisions, if you keep following something that... But the thing is, it keeps rewarding me. Every day I wake up and it brings me joy. And, it's almost like... I don't want to say a religion, but it's almost like something that I have faith in. Even at these times, I know that my love for this music and what it's rewarded me through my life will get me through and will continue to reward if I continue to invest in it. So for me, it brings me joy, and I see the joy it brings other people when we perform, and that makes me fulfilled, and it gives me a reason to get up and enjoy my day and my life.
Adrian Cunningham, our guest for this week's In-Studio podcast from Simply Timeless. Visit his website, adriancunningham.com, for more info on his latest albums and other work in his career. The Disney release is one of my personal favorites. It's a joy to have you join us again. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Jay Daniels. This is In Studio from Simply Timeless.